to the people that need it, when they need it, for the problems that they're working on. And so last time we did ask you guys to reflect a little bit on some of your goals. We talked a little bit about a couple of the displays in the core analytics data system that we tend to call the dashboard, although there's other dashboards, and there's lots of different things called core. But the growth metric being one of them, which some of you guys had a chance to dig into. Some of you guys chose to take a closer look at the gap trends. And both of these have their place and have different conversations that they can fit into. We also took a look at something that we've been working on here that Heather's going to show, how much we've developed on that, looking at UC data trends and the progress that we've had over the last 10 years on applications and enrollment. But we did also ask that you guys think about, like, who's this data for? Like, who should it be shared with? And so we captured some of the folks that were mentioned in the document that we had for you guys to reflect on. So some of this data could be shared with school boards to help, maybe guide some of their decision making. District and site admin to maybe guide some of their decision making as well, and maybe spurn some questions that need further investigation. I think that's something that will come up a little bit today. You guys also mentioned sharing it with school site council, different parent stakeholder groups, EL and special education coordinators, which are looking at working with specific populations. And so, they have data that they're looking at as well, and giving them what they need to better do the work that they do. Superintendents, teachers, counselors, AVID instructors, all of these folks kind of came up in your comments. But you guys can probably even look at the very small sampling of things that we looked at last time. And if you kind of put on a different hat from one of these roles, like a teacher is going to look at this very differently than a site administrator, and very differently than a school board. And they have different decisions to make, which for folks like us, it puts us in a position to think about, like, all right, like, what decision do these folks have to make, and what do they need to be looking at, and when do they need to be looking at it? And so we'll kind of continue to dig into that as time goes on throughout the course of the year. I do want to actually take a second to pull up the reflection space, which I believe you guys have access to in the agenda. Last time, you guys each have, like, your own space. So if you're Corcoran, you can click on Corcoran and go straight there. We have some new reflecting space for this particular session that kind of goes into some of the things that we'll be talking about this time. But last session, you guys can review some of the answers that you put there. But we also asked this other piece as far as, like, is there one place that you guys are focusing this year? And some folks kind of did narrow it down to a single space. Some folks still have, like, different things that they're focusing on in all areas. And then underneath, there was an opportunity to kind of try to articulate as specifically as we can a goal that we might be working on. And we had kind of considered talking about one of those goals, but we do want to give you guys a chance. If you didn't last time, and you did want to add some detail there, like, that would be helpful for us. There are certain things that we are all currently going through, namely probably a big challenge with the pandemic, student engagement that seems to be wavering as time goes on. I know lots of folks are kind of making and remaking plans to return to school. And so at some point, maybe next session, we want to give you guys a chance to share the knowledge base you guys have each built, and have an opportunity to kind of discuss some of that. But I did want to give us a chance to give a status update. So I'll turn it over to Heather for a moment.
All right, so I'm going to put the tracker into the text, the chat box. You're all familiar with this document at this point. We just want to keep bringing you back to this document, having you check on your uploading status. There are still a few outstanding files. Everyone has made really good progress getting in the things that we're missing, so thank you very much. There are a few files that you'll see that they're highlighted in yellow, but they also have a check mark. That means that I know that you've submitted it. I've seen it show up in ShareFile, but we're still waiting to hear from core as to whether or not it's been successfully loaded. So you can just sort of sit on that one for the time being until we know if it went through or if it needs to be redone. But anything that is highlighted in yellow with no check mark, that means that it hasn't been received, whether it's been loaded before or not. It hasn't been done or it wasn't successful, so it needs to be uploaded still. So if you all could work on that, we would really appreciate it. And please take a second to go and check that document right now. In case you have any questions, just let us know if we can help in any way to get all of these files loaded. Everyone's very, very close. Some of you are done. Thank you very much. So please go and check that out right now. And as you do that, we're going to move forward. You've probably all received an email with this invitation. Last time we all spoke, we asked you, would you prefer to have one big training session like we had back in March, or would you prefer to have a couple of small ones that go over one piece at a time? You all said both. So we're going to work on getting both going for you. But in the meantime, we've scheduled the big training session that you requested. So that's what this is. It's on November 10th. It'll be from 9 to noon on Zoom. Noah Bookman, who is Core's CEO, and Latoya Buford, who came in March, will be leading this. They'll be walking us all through the dashboard and how to use it and different use cases, how other districts have used this information, give you all a chance to explore your own data now that you actually have data in the dashboard, since back in March, very few of us did because we were just getting started. So there'll be much more to look at this time, so it can be a much more thorough exploration. We'd really like to nudge you all to start thinking about who you might invite to this. And there's actually a space on your reflection document where you can start recording a list of people that you might want to approach separately or send an email to, or have a chat with about how important this is. Think about who needs to see this, who needs this training. As Javier is showing on the screen, in our secondary work group folder, you all have access to this list. It's called the core user list. You can look up your district and it has a list of everyone who has a core credential right now. So these lists were submitted possibly by you, by your superintendent, and we created credentials for all of these folks. So anybody who's on this list has received an invitation to the 10th. But if there's someone who's not on this list, please feel free to reach out to them, send them the invitation, let them know about this, emphasize that it's really important, and you can still request new credentials from us. Just let us know the person's name and their information that you see here on the screen, and we can create new credentials quickly. So it's not too late. So please just let us know, because we'd like for anybody who comes to this training to be able to log into the dashboard. And again, I just want to emphasize that we're really hoping for you all to look at this as you are now core ambassadors. You all have had, several opportunities to learn about core. This will be another huge opportunity to learn how to use the system. So we're hoping that you can now go forward and help train your team from here, that we can all kind of share this responsibility in getting everyone on board with this system. So please really kind of think about that as you're there and learning, and think about that as you consider who you might invite to this.
I might add any of those folks that you've created an account for, or think might need one or might benefit from knowing about this. Invite them to come if they can spare the 3 hours on the 10th. It is anybody that kind of starts to learn their way through the system. It's one less person that will need to kind of do this with somewhere down the road. That you would have to do this with somewhere down the road. It's kind of like the big opening salvo in terms of like getting our users to actually use the system.
Right. And Lisa Castillo is asking for this document, the user list. So if somebody could drop that in the chat, that would be great. I think we are going to move on.
Oh, I will stop share.
Does anyone have any questions about core really quick? Any questions about your uploading status, about getting new credentials, about this event that we're having? I'm just gonna pause for a minute or so. You can drop them in the chat or you can unmute. Lori just put the list of users into the chat.
As a reference to many of these links or these documents are linked to your agenda. Just later, if you want to revisit, they should be in there.
Yes.
Thanks, Mike.
Oh yeah, Mike just dropped the whole folder. Thank you, Beck, very much. So I'm gonna share my screen and we are gonna get into Tableau. Has everyone seen Tableau? Anybody? Thumbs up? All right, cool. So we looked at this last time. It looks a little different this time. We made a few changes. Last time we went over UC information. This time we're gonna look at CSU information, and these are both laid out the same. So I'll explain how it functions, and that applies to the previous UC information as well. So with the new layout, you have everything on one page instead of having to switch between 2 pages to get each piece of information. You just follow the instructions, 1, 2, 3, select your high school, select your student group. Again, this is limited to only the student groups that are tracked in CSU data. So it's, just a few ethnicities. And then below, you can select a bar, which then isolates 1 year of data. And this tells you how many students actually applied. This tells you how many students were admitted. And this tells you how many students were enrolled. So if you click a bar, it isolates that year and tells you how many students applied, admitted, or enrolled. And then based on which bar you select, that then changes the information over here. So then if we select how many students admitted, we see 87% of the eligible students were admitted. And then if we select enrolled, we see 42% of eligible students actually enrolled. And I just want to point this out on the applied. If you see numbers like this that are more than 100%, that just means that more students applied, admitted, or enrolled than were technically UC-CSU eligible, which is totally possible. That can happen. It's much harder for those students to actually get admitted and enroll, but it does happen. So if you see some weird numbers, it's not an error. It just means that those two numbers were different. So as before, we can see what percentage of graduates were eligible. And then this just breaks those eligible students down further. So you can explore your own schools however much you would like. Check out your historical information. This side obviously deals with the number of applications. So you can see for Avenel High School, the number of applications has really gone up over the years, which is great. That also means the number of enrollees has gone up as well. So there is that, and then we added a few elements. This one looks at the number of, we can't really tell how many students have applied. We can't just like definitively say that number because there's likely overlap, because students can apply to a UC, they can apply to a CSU all at the same time. So there's likely the same students counting repeatedly in those numbers. But we can definitively say how many students ultimately enroll in either system, because you can only enroll in one school. So that's what this looks at. This gray bit is all the students who graduated but were not UC CSU eligible. This lighter purple bit shows how many students were actually eligible but did not ultimately enroll in either system, in a UC or a CSU. And the darker purple bit is the number of students who actually did enroll ultimately. So we see that of all the graduates here at Redwood High School in 2019, 19% of all graduates ultimately enrolled in either a UC or a CSU. And so same thing, we can select a different school and see how the numbers change. You can select a different student group. You can select a different graduating class. So this is just here for you all to explore what's been happening in your system in terms of actual enrollment in either system. We really wanted to combine those and see, you know, who actually is going when they've done the work to be eligible for these systems, how many actually end up enrolling ultimately. And as we can see, these numbers, they're pretty low. They were pretty surprising. So you can take a look at that. The other element that was added was this map. I was really curious to see, you know, the distance that students are willing to go, and if that changes when they ultimately enroll. You know, are they dreaming further away when they're applying, and then once they finally choose to enroll somewhere, are they choosing to stay closer to home? So as always, we can select student group, select the graduating year, select school, and then up here we can scroll through application status from applied, admitted, enrolled, and then you can see how things change. And the size of the bubble is dictated by the number of students. So here we have 26, and over here we have 4. So that's why these are sized differently. So you can kind of see where students are concentrating more when they apply, admit, or enroll. So this is admitted, and then ultimately when students enrolled, they ended up in either Davis or Merced. And we've got 3 students here and 3 students here. So I just felt it was interesting to see, you know, how it kind of contracts. You know, we've got students applying all the way down to UCLA and UC Santa Barbara, but then once they finally enroll, we end up with just Davis and Merced in the end, and only 6 students. So again, you can explore this. This is a summary for the entire region for Tulare Kings. Students most often enroll at these top 3 UCs, and they are most often admitted to these top 3, and they most often apply to these top 3. So we want to give you guys some time to explore this on your own. if you could take maybe 5 minutes or so, say till 9:30. The link is in the agenda. I think it might have also been put into the chat. Just take a look and explore your own schools and see what you notice. And we will give you some time to reflect in a bit. Just look and notice right now. Hiskia asked where the data for these visuals is coming from. Both UC and CSU have bits of their websites where they report just like raw numbers, big tables of information. And that's where we pulled all of this from. And then any graduation or CSU, UC eligibility numbers come from CDE. So I'm going to put the sources that we use in the chat. You can, there's also a little box on each one of the charts that has the bar graph and the 2 donuts. It says click here for sources. If you click that, it opens up a little box that shows these sources as well. And Rudy's asking about the map. Saying that you can't find it. On the Tableau link, it's the last tab. There's a few tabs across the top. One says UC, one says CSU, another one says UC and CSU, and then there's a map at the end. It's been about 5 minutes, so I'm gonna direct you all to your reflection space. I'm gonna drop the link in the chat box. You could all navigate to your district's reflection space. We have a little bookmark page where you can just click on your district and it'll drop you straight down to your area. And we've got a few questions that we'd like you to consider after having looked at this new CSU data. So if you could take another 5 minutes just to sort of consider those questions and give us some responses. The reason that we're asking you all these questions is because we want to try and refine the data that we bring to you and make sure that these meetings are really serving your needs and get you kind of thinking about how can this be used. We don't want any of this to just be, you know, some interesting information that we look at when we're at this work group and then it's sort of set aside until the next time we all meet. We really want you to think about, you know, who could I take this back to? How could this be used in our system? Why would this be important to the work that we're doing? Where does this fit? So if you could all go to your district reflection space, think about those questions and give us some responses, we'd really appreciate it. So let's just take another 5 minutes and do that. And you can continue digging through the UC-CSU data as well. All right, it's been about 5 minutes. You're all free to continue adding to that document and continue exploring that resource. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. You can unmute now and ask or drop questions into the chat. And we just want to let you know that this will be shared with the counselors network. So I see a lot of people saying this would be great for counselors to know about. So the counselors will be learning about this resource soon. I see some people asking questions about the discrepancy between the UC and the CSU full enrollment pages and the one that combines them. And that has to do with the way that UC and CSU report their data and the way that they mask student groups if the numbers are too small. So UC doesn't report any enrollees that if there's less than 3. CSU doesn't report any if there's less than 10. So if there are fewer than either of those numbers in UC or CSU, there will be no data. And that just is a feature of how they report their information. We're gonna try and see if we can find a way around that so that it, you know, if there's at least a couple of UC students and there's no CSU students, it'll still report something, but we haven't gotten that far. So this is going to be continuously refined. We're hoping to add community college information next, and just keep building on this every time that we meet. So it might even look completely different the next time, since it, you know, the look evolved from the last time. We'll see, but we're finding this. So if you have questions, if you have suggestions, please just let us know, because this is a resource for you. We're not just, you know, doing this for ourselves. We'd like it to serve your needs. So let us know.
And to answer Mike's question, the data that I think we have represented in there is from the first-time freshman part. So transfers, like that is also on the Cal State site. So if you go back to a few moments ago in the chat, Heather posted the CSU and the UC, like their data stores the things that we're drawing from. The CSU one does have a tab that talks about transfers. I don't know that it tracks back to individual high schools though. So we can kind of look a little bit closer and see if we can track that down, but we can get some community college transfer data that way, but it doesn't seem to go back to K-12 districts.
And Hiskia was asking if there's an easy way to reach the Tableau page from our TCOE homepage, and the answer is not yet. Hopefully soon. We'll have to find a way to get this added there, but at the moment, the Tableau page is just its own separate thing. So please bookmark it or something, do something to save it so you can navigate back to it easily. And Elisa is saying that she appreciates having time to look through this. We're going to give you guys time to break out later and discuss it amongst yourselves, but we just want to kind of roll through all the data and then set you guys loose to go and talk about it. So I'd hand it back to Javier. Yes?
I have a quick question in regard to the use of space to generate a list of people who should be invited. You had mentioned the list, which I looked at, and we've got a lot of people who are on there. Are those people on that list all being invited, or do we need to suggest?
Everyone on that list has already received the same email invitation that you received. We would still appreciate it if you could individually, you know, push and nudge and let people know that this is very important. And if there's anybody who's not on that list that you think should be, please, you know, send an email or put them into that box on your reflection space just to let us know that we need to reach some other folks.
Thanks.
And please do some individual outreach yourself as well. We would appreciate it.
All right. So thank you, Heather, for that great explanation. We are going to shift over to CalPass Plus and a couple of different displays that they have there. I'm going to turn it over to Lori. I think she has some things to share.
Yeah, I know you're all familiar with CalPass Plus, but just a reference. It's a data system designed to inform effective alignment of programs and curriculum, identify best practices, address the achievement gap, and help with post-secondary transitions. So I'll go ahead and put, I think it's linked on your agenda, but I'll drop it into the chat just to make it easy. So districts are currently uploading right now. So if you're one of those people, you know, you've gotten the email probably within the last 2 weeks. It's very similar to some of the other uploads or core uploads that you've done. And I know you've done it for several years, so it's nothing new, but this is the season for the new uploads. But the login system offers, if you go over to the, you know, the K-12 school tabs, I mean, there's a lot of great information on the site. So it's one of those things that we don't always often go back and visit, but they have high school, the community college transition reports, their public student achievement data, STEM, and their waterfall dashboard, which is both county level and district level. So what we wanted to do today is kind of add to this conversation about post-secondary transitions. Heather and Javier shared the university data. I mean, every time I see what they're working on there, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly the kind of information and displays that people are going to get excited about. I get excited about seeing all the work that they're doing in there. And so just to add to that conversation, I think the CalPass Plus waterfall really gives us a broader look at our post-secondary transition efforts in our area. So what we're going to have you do in Teresa's email, I know she kind of said, hey, if you can just to jog your memory, like remember how to log in. If you could go ahead and log in and navigate over to the K-12 schools tab, you can click on, you know, the waterfalls. You'll see like the drop down and where you'll see the waterfall dashboards. I know Javier is going to kind of go into that a little further here. So go ahead, Javier. I'll just let you kind of explain what we're going to do here.
Sure, thanks. I'm hoping that I have the right screen up. Do I? Okay. So if I go back just a little bit, this is where you end up going to upload your data. We got the same email, but this predates like Heather and I both being like here on the data team. So how your data made it in here, like I'm sure at some point along the way you guys got asked to upload data. I'm sure that that's happened and it's supposed to happen again. As Lori mentioned, it's a lot of similar files to what you guys are doing for the core dashboard. But there's some really fascinating displays that are in here. And while we're going to focus mainly on the waterfall, I do want to point out that there's two levels. There's a county level, which I'm going to click on just to keep it kind of general. And then you have your own district level, which I'll encourage you all to click on to explore your own data. So when we get to the waterfall dashboard for the county one, you can just select a county, and I can't pick both Tulare and Kings, but so I'll select Tulare. And then we get this list of years, which when you look, you're like, oh, like all the way back to 2012, 2013. Well, the reason it goes back so far is like we're trying to figure that those are the students who have had enough time to have leave our high schools and go to college or not go to college, or transfer from a community college to a four-year institution, and ultimately join the workforce. And so there's some data that's in there. The details of which, how it's collected and how it's tracked is not entirely clear to us at this particular point in time. But our informed guess is that it's taking the data that you guys are uploading and kind of cross-referencing it with other things that are available. Once you have a year selected, you have three options over here. I'm going to leave it at overall for now, but suffice to say, I think it's kind of nice to be able to explore how things might be a little different based on demographics like gender and ethnicity. Click on view, and then you get this crazy looking display that has all these kind of branching paths. And what this is basically a Sankey diagram, which takes every student that came in or is reported to be in your area or in your institution at 9th grade, and then what happens at each kind of major transition point. Some of you guys have probably had a chance to see this before. I know Heather shared this at one of our little webinars several months ago, but you know, we start here with these students that began their high school career at your campus or campuses, and then how many of them actually complete high school. If I roll over the little the gray bars, it kind of tells me a little bit more about that particular group of students. So up here we have the ones that completed, down here we have the ones that did not complete high school in the county within 4 years. So either they took a little bit longer, or maybe they left and went somewhere else, but there are further details about what happened with them. Of the completers, you see that branches even further. Some of them where there's no record in a higher education institution, which is a pretty big band. This thinner band, which are students that go straight to enrolling in a university. And according to this data set, which I believe is aggregating all of the other data sets, it's 166 students. Down here, we have like the group that enrolled in community college, which is over 1,100 students there. And then you get to see like, okay, so of the ones that went to community college, how many of them transferred to a 4-year? You can see that very thin filament here for the 2012, 2013 cohort, or what's reported for them is particularly small, 19 kids. So out of the 1,100, we end up with just under 20, and many that are still enrolled. If you scroll down below, you get a few more details about what's going on. A through G completers, students that completed high school in the county, the number of students reported enrolled according to the data set, and then how many end up going to community college, how many transfer, as well as some other details that might be of interest to you. Again, if we go down and take a look at like some of the ethnicity data, and that, what did I do here?
It's disaggregated, yeah.
Thank you. I was like, wait a minute. You can go through and take a look at different groups and see how things kind of went group by group and get some additional details down below, which we think you guys will find interesting. Obviously, the further back you go, the more chance they've got to complete you know, their post K-12 studies, and so you might see a little bit of difference, but all in all, it gives us some interesting details about how that might be looking for the students. And as we've been doing, we do want to give you guys a chance to kind of explore some. Let me get this back up. So we'll do very similar to what Heather had you guys do with the CSU data. We'll give you guys about 5 minutes to just kind of sift around, dig through, see what questions are coming up for you, see what see where this kind of is guiding your thinking, and then if you after about 5 minutes, I'll prompt you guys to go over to share some of your insights. But let's go ahead and get you guys into that document, and I'll leave you guys alone for 5 minutes to kind of explore at your own pace. And as always, any questions that come up, you can go ahead and put in the chat.
Javier, I answered a question in the chat regarding how the 2012-13 is the year that this particular cohort were freshmen. And so then it tracks them. I just want to make sure I'm saying right. It's 2 years after, right? It's tracking. So it's class of 2016 graduation year. And then is it 2 years after or just 1 year after?
I believe it's 2 years. They want to give them a chance to have some sort of outcome. So
I just wanted to make sure I was saying it right. I did say 2 years, but
yeah.
I wanted to double check. Okay.
So this information sounds old, but it, you know, they've had to have time to actually, you know, go all the way through the university and have an outcome.
If you haven't already, I'll go ahead and prompt you guys to, if you have any reflections to share, go ahead and jump over to the reflection document. At the very top, you'll see kind of like a table of contents, which each of the districts, you can click directly on that and it'll send you to your section. But just let us know, how's this hidden? Like what kinds of things are you noticing about the data? Like speculate a little bit, like why do you think that might be happening? And then are there things to celebrate in it? Or are there things that are kind of raising a flag for you that like, oh, we need to maybe do something about this? Appreciate any insights you might be able to drop in there. We're hoping to just keep adding to that to kind of build up insights over time. You'll kind of notice that this data is to some degree related to the data that we were looking at earlier. It's just a different perspective of a lot of very similar data. Obviously, what Heather presented goes a little bit more up close and detailed about what's going on with specifically UC and CSU enrollment, whereas this kind of is a bit of a step back and just kind of looking at, all right, who's getting to higher ed, and what venues generally, like community college, four-year institutions, transfer data, or going straight potentially into the workforce. There's, I think, a lot of questions to be explored in this space. And I think that's one of the challenges that we're gonna have as a group, is thinking about like, all right, this gives us a look. The UC CSU displays give us a different look of some similar looking things, or similar components of this. And so like, how do we put these things together? I know it's a massive challenge to have your SIS and core dashboard and the California State dashboard and your like all these other systems that you guys have, and like trying to figure out like, how do these things fit together in a cohesive way that's usable for the people at my district. And that's kind of a massive challenge. There's lots of places to look, and most of these things like people aren't super proficient in. Even taking something like the core dashboard, for instance, we've all just got into it a few months ago, and the likelihood is that all those folks, the almost 300 people with accounts already, like the majority of them probably haven't cracked it open, and if they did, like they don't know necessarily like, oh, like I know exactly what to do with this. And so that's something that we're hoping to try to kind of address over the course of our time together. The other thing is like, there's spaces in here, like, from freshman year to graduation, like there is probably a whole Sankey diagram, a whole one of these waterfalls that could be developed just within your district, like within your site, high school by high school. Like, how are kids flowing through the math classes? How are kids flowing through A through G courses? What is it that they're taking and not taking, and where are the bottlenecks that are kind of holding things up? So even though it looks like this big solid block, there is a whole lot of like pathways and piping that kind of happen along the way. And then the last little thing, this is, our conversations have really kind of focused last meeting and this meeting on like four-year attainment, four-year university attainment, like which kids are getting to that point. But you guys have a much broader charge, right? Of like thinking about pathways and different ways of kind of developing kids for workforce positions, whether or not that involves a four-year degree. And we did want to take a moment to talk a little bit about some of those metrics. I'm just going to jump over here. Tied to that Count Pass Plus site is the ERP metrics. If you go to Data Portal Home, you get these various displays. And just for the sake of looking, we're not going to give you guys a huge moment to kind of go in and look at this specifically, although you're welcome to later. Like the labor metrics we found kind of interesting, and it goes a little bit further than just like the kids coming out of school. This is actually taking, I believe, census data, and we can break it down by region. And it doesn't necessarily go by county, it like does like these macro regions, but if we look at specific industries, whether it be agricultural, whether it be education, whatever we want to look at, you can kind of take a look and see what's going on in terms of the demographics. And what we found really interesting were these diagrams where you get to see like amongst all people in that industry, and here it's broken down male and female, like what's the earning look like for those folks. And again, similarly, and they just break it down via white and non-white people working in this industry? What's the earning breakdown along these cut lines of those folks? And the reason we bring this up is it just points to some interesting statistics, because like the likelihood of somebody reaching the top earning potential like is very likely predicated on whether or not they get the right certification, a degree, or things like that. And so, you know, as we think about like prepping folks for being gainfully employed and productive members of society, it's like, you know, how we send them out, like, you know, we help contribute to this in some small way. But some things to consider we're thinking about, especially when we consider like the full charge of what we do. So
I think that's a big reason why we're bringing up all of this information. Obviously, it's information related to what happens after our K-12 system, but we want everyone to start considering, you know, what's our responsibility for these outcomes? How are our systems affecting these outcomes and leading our students down these paths? And, you know, if we have X amount of students who are UC-CSU eligible, why are they not applying? Why are they not enrolling? What barriers are in their way, and what can we do about those barriers? If we have lots of students going to our local community colleges, but then we're noticing on the waterfall that the number of students who actually transfer out is a very, very thin thread. Is there anything within our system that we can do to, you know, make that thread thicker and help those students transfer on to the next level to get a 4-year degree so that they can move into those higher earning jobs?
and I'm gonna hand it over to Lori. Appreciate all of you who have had a chance to share some insights in the reflection space. Let me see if I can get this. There we go.
So, and Elisa called it out earlier in the chat that, you know, this is, and this is, again, the goal of the group is to hopefully you'll see this work group as some protected time. And I know there's some blocks of silence along the way, but hopefully that's thinking time and time for you guys to just really have an opportunity. You guys are busy all the time and putting out fires, and hopefully this is going to be that opportunity and space to really dig into your data systems and learn from each other. So we would love for you guys to share your learning and our questions, like Javier mentioned before, like something that's making you uncomfortable, red flags that have come up while you're looking at it, or you're like excited about something you've seen in the data for your district. But to get together and sort of share your learnings around these data sets. What benefits does the data bring to your planning moving forward? And then once you're in your breakout groups, if you could kind of nominate someone to hopefully share something meaningful that came out of that discussion, we would really appreciate it. So Heather's going to go ahead and put us into some breakout rooms. I'm going to put the question that you guys are going to kind of talk about in the chat right now.
We're going to give you guys 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, another thing too, I'm not sure if y'all are aware, but Fresno State, you know, they have their Visalia campus that's connected to COS, and they're looking at expanding their programs. So students that are here in Tulare and Kings counties, you know, it'll be easier for them. They won't have to travel as far. And then especially with everybody going online distance learning with the pandemic, I think it's opening a lot of considerations around having more things online and making it easier for students to complete certain courses. I mean, some things have to be done with labs and whatnot, but yeah, I think that hopefully this will cause some positive shifts in the education system. So.
Welcome back, everyone. If anyone has anything they'd like to share from their group or discussion or learning, we would absolutely appreciate it. Volunteers?
We want more data.
More and more, always more.
What exactly would you like?
Well, what's really, and this is just because I've kind of watched it grow up over the last 4 years, as we start to get this feedback from the community colleges and the colleges, is how accurate it is. What are some of the circumstances? You know, just because somebody doesn't get a certificate doesn't mean they necessarily get a job, and that means it ties into ERP. And I mean, getting all of these different pieces to work together. I mean, we've just now started getting at least high school to go to secondary. So I guess more of the little tiny pieces that we want to know why our kids are showing like they're not going and completing stuff, but we know a lot of them are getting jobs just from interviews with them.
Yeah, I think we all kind of wonder about what are those things that aren't tracked, that are kind of, you know, filling in these things that look like gaps, but maybe aren't necessarily gaps just because we don't have data. So it looks like they fell out of the system, or, you know, they didn't get a degree, but they actually just went into the workforce and they have a job now. So it's not like this dire situation that it looks like. We don't have the data that shows any of that story.
Some data that might be interesting, I wonder if we could get, and Lori might be able to chime in on this, is the journeyman apprenticeship programs from our local trade unions. Because sometimes they'll start at community college and take a couple of classes and get accepted into some of those training programs and get really, you know, high paying jobs. And that might be a data source we can access.
I wonder if they collect like where they come from when their intake. I mean, it's going to be a small group, but yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's a great consideration that wouldn't be part of this, you know, our typical post-secondary system, but apprenticeship, I mean, it's an education and a job. So it's definitely, at least they land. Mm-hmm.
And it might be information that we can easily get, because I know they typically have to ask them for, like, you know, an electrician union, you have to prove that you passed Algebra 1. You have to provide your transcript or something. And I believe several of the other unions have that too, which means they've got the name of the high school sitting in front of them typically at some point or another.
We have contacts with the apprenticeship coordinators in our region. So I mean, if we want to collect information, I'm not sure how it would tie in with the waterfall data set that y'all are showing, but I mean, there are things like that we can find out probably.
Yeah. Lori, do we have the ability to tie into the union memberships to find out if they've become a union member, which means they're getting a high paying job that way?
I don't know. I assume that would be connected back to the apprenticeship coordinators as well, because once they're in, then they're union paying at that point. So it's part of their list, so to speak. So I'm thinking it's one and the same information, but we could find out from them. Yeah.
Thank you, Lori.
Any other things that came up for anyone? Any questions? Any final comments? Okay, Javier.
Yeah, thank you all for
wrap it up.
Thank you all for sharing all of what you were able to. Those are all really fantastic questions. I think like the big thing is trying to figure out where this data is, how do we get access to it, and then like how do we get it to the right people. And like for us, it's like we're going to get it to you guys, but like you guys still have like that last leg. Like somebody else needs to see this, right? And so who are those folks? When do they need to see that? And for what purpose? I think those are the questions that we'll kind of keep coming back to. So appreciate all the thought that you guys have put into, you know, just digging into what we've shared today, posing questions and kind of challenging us to go look for other things to connect to this. And then, you know, just thinking through this all together. I think that's super, super helpful. We were having a discussion out here in the, I guess in the lobby, for lack of a better thing, where you guys were in breakout, just about like what does it mean for the kids in our valley to go to these institutions. Like going to college tends to mean that you're taking a kid who's probably, because we live in the valley and it's kind of small town after small town after small town, very community oriented, very family oriented. Even our bigger cities are kind of have that small town vibe, and going somewhere far away typically means you're going by yourself and you're kind of getting uprooted from your support system. And so that, like, even if a kid is super excited about the prospect of that, at some point that hits, and like having your support system far away rather than nearby, like that can kind of hit a lot of different ways. Whether it's, you know, the financial stresses of like, you have to have housing when you don't live near a university that you can just kind of like go to, but to just having emotional support from people that are close to you already. But there's lots of different places to go with this data, and lots of things to consider in how we support the students. I do have some updates to share as we kind of wind down our session here together. Some exciting things to share. You guys hopefully have this on your calendar, the core convening happening monthly. There is one tomorrow at 2 p.m. If you pull up the slides, the registration link is down at the bottom there. Usually lasts an hour and a half, and it's a nice opportunity to hear from other folks throughout the state, different county offices, kind of get a sense of what CORE's working on behind the scenes. I think they have some things that they'll be sharing specific to each of the partnering districts. I don't know if it's tomorrow. I think it is tomorrow. But just kind of seeing what they've got going on. So hopefully we'll see a lot of you guys there. Additionally, usually they have two full kind of conference type events throughout the year. The fall one, for obvious reasons, is going virtual. That'll happen on November 20th. Do register for that. The first one that Heather and I attended earlier this year, we also had Hiskia join us, which was up in Sacramento, and like literally right before everything shut down. It was there was a lot of terrific sessions, and you will hear from other districts that are saying like, here's specifically how we use the dashboard to do X or Y or Z, goal setting, continuous improvement type things, to a level of detail that I think is probably more useful to you, in that like, this is how a district or a site is using it. So do register for that. And then obviously we have the thing coming up in about 2 weeks on November 10th. Again, you know, we want to hopefully encourage you guys to invite as many of your colleagues to attend. This is going to be like the one big shot where we get a chance to kind of give everybody a chance to like handle the dashboard and kind of explore it, and then we can kind of build off of that. So setting a foundation for us all. You guys also, I think we mentioned this last time, we have Stephanie Evergreen coming very soon. We do have, I'll say tentative, but I'm pretty sure that these are the dates, December 10th and February 3rd and 4th. They're two very different types of workshops. The December 10th is what she calls the Data Consumer Workshop. It's a little bit more of like a light version, if you will, of like, how do you read this stuff and how do you communicate that? And it's basically a 3-hour session broken up into 2 90-minute chunks. You can see the breakdown there. She likes to put like a nice generous gap in the middle, just because Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And then on February 3rd and 4th, we have the Data Analyst Workshop, which gets a little bit more in depth. It's over 2 days because it's 6 hours, 3 hours each day. And that's an opportunity to really dig in and get our hands dirty with some of the data. We think that either one would be appropriate for you guys to attend, but like specifically the data folks on the call, like the 3rd and the 4th is kind of like the one that I'd keep my eye on. Additionally, we have TCOE's Learning and Leadership Forum coming up soon. The first session is coming up on the 13th, another one January and March. We have the Equity Conference coming up in late January with Jamila Lyscott and Father Greg Boyle. Just recently had a chance to read Dr. Lyscott's book, and it is terrific. I think that there's, I think, a lot of big implications when we think about data and how that ties in with equity. Later this afternoon, we have the third of Dr. Gorski's session. So if you've registered to attend those, we look forward to seeing you then. And if you haven't, you're welcome to come. I don't think this has any cost associated with it. The first two sessions have been recorded, so if you wanted to go catch up, you can. But the OMS link is on that flyer. Hopefully we'll see some of you guys later today. Aside from that, unless you guys have any questions, we want to thank you guys all for sticking it out to the bitter end, and we will see you guys soon.
Hey, thanks again for all that work on the Tableau. That was great.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you all.